Dr. Amanda Price stood in front of the massive screen in the United Earth Council chamber. Her hands shook slightly as she held the remote control. Behind her, the screen showed images of Venus covered in thick yellow clouds. The planet looked beautiful from space, but everyone knew it was a death trap. "Ladies and gentlemen," Amanda began, her voice steady despite her nerves. "For over a century, we have dreamed of colonizing Venus. Every attempt has failed. 3. Missions have been lost. But today I want to show you something that will change everything." The screen changed to show a diagram of Venus with different colored layers. Amanda pointed to a section 50 kilometers above the surface. "This is where we need to look. Not down on the surface where the pressure can crush a submarine and the temperature can melt lead. Up here, in the upper atmosphere." Commander Jake Morrison shifted in his seat. He had been on Mars for 10 years and had seen too many good people die trying to tame hostile worlds. Venus had earned its reputation as the graveyard of human ambition. "Dr. Price," he said, "we've heard this before." "The upper atmosphere is still filled with sulfuric acid," Amanda nodded. "You're right, Commander, but look at these numbers." The screen showed temperature and pressure readings. At 50 kilometers altitude, the temperature is 20 degrees Celsius. The pressure is almost identical to Earth at sea level. "Yes, there is sulfuric acid, but we can deal with that." Dr. Helen Brooks, the materials scientist, leaned forward. She had spent 5 years developing new compounds that could resist the worst chemicals known to science. "Amanda, what about the corrosion? Even if we can survive the pressure and temperature, the acid will eat through anything we build." "That's where your work comes in, Helen," Amanda smiled. "Your new composite material has been tested in simulated Venus conditions for 6 months. It shows no signs of degradation. Combined with our atmospheric processors, we can create a bubble of breathable air that will support human life." The room fell silent. Everyone understood what Amanda was suggesting. Not a research station that would last a few months, but a permanent settlement. A floating city in the clouds of Venus. Carlos Rivera, the atmospheric engineer, spoke up. "The energy requirements would be enormous. How do we power something like this?" Amanda clicked the remote again. The screen showed a detailed diagram of an atmospheric processor. "We use the atmosphere itself. The temperature difference between the upper and lower cloud layers can generate massive amounts of power. Plus, the thick atmosphere provides natural radiation shielding. We would actually be safer from cosmic radiation than on Mars." Lisa Thompson, the architect, had been studying the designs for weeks. She understood the challenges better than anyone. "The engineering problems are incredible. How do we build something that can float permanently? What happens during storms? How do we maintain stability?" "Modular construction," Amanda replied. "We build the city in sections, each one capable of independent operation. The atmospheric processors don't just create breathable air, they also provide lift. The city will literally float on the air it creates." Jake Morrison stood up. He had commanded 3 different space missions and had never seen anything like this. "Dr. Price, you're talking about putting thousands of people in the most dangerous environment in the solar system. One failure and everyone dies." Amanda met his gaze. "Commander, with respect, we put thousands of people in space every day. We have colonies on Mars, mining stations in the asteroid belt, and research outposts on the moons of Jupiter. Every one of those places will kill you in seconds if something goes wrong. Venus is dangerous, but it's not impossible." "Dr. Helen." Brooks was looking at the material specifications on her tablet. "Amanda, I need to ask about the construction process. How do we build something this large in Venus' atmosphere?" "We use orbital construction platforms," Amanda explained. "We've done this before with space stations. The difference is we're building an atmosphere instead of vacuum. Actually, that makes some things easier. We have air for propulsion and thermal regulation." Carlos Rivera was running calculations on his device. The power output from atmospheric thermal conversion could work. We might even generate surplus energy, but what about food, water? Everything else humans need? The atmosphere contains water. Vapor, Amanda said. We can extract what we need. For food, we use advanced hydroponics. The controlled environment actually gives us advantages over Earth-based agriculture. Lisa Thompson was sketching on her tablet. The city design would need to be flexible, not just modular, but adaptive. If we can't predict every challenge, we need to be ready to modify the structure. Amanda nodded. Exactly. We're not just building a city, we're building a new way of life. The first truly atmospheric civilization in human history. The council members were beginning to understand the scope of the project. This wasn't just another research mission. This was a permanent expansion of human civilization into an entirely new environment. What about families? Asked Dr. Sarah. Kim, the council's social scientist. You're talking about people living their entire lives in the clouds. Children growing up without ever touching solid ground. Amanda had thought about this question for months. Dr. Kim, children on Mars have never breathed natural air or seen a blue sky. Children on asteroid mining stations have never felt real gravity. But they're healthy, happy, and contributing to human civilization. The children of Venus will be the first true aerial humans. Commander Morrison was still skeptical, but he was beginning to see the possibilities. The logistics would be incredible. How do we supply a floating city? How do we get people there safely? The same way we supply Mars, Amanda replied. Regular transport runs. The advantage is that Venus is closer to Earth than Mars. Travel time is actually shorter. And once the city is established, it can be largely self-sufficient. Dr. Helen Brooks was running stress calculations. The storms on Venus are legendary. How do we protect the city from wind speeds that can reach hundreds of kilometers per hour? Adaptive systems, Amanda explained. The city can change its configuration based on weather conditions. Individual modules can be raised or lowered. The atmospheric processors can be adjusted to maintain stability. We're not fighting the storms, we're dancing with them. Carlos Rivera looked up from his calculations. This could work. Not just as a research station, but as a real colony. The energy production alone would justify the investment. Lisa Thompson was getting excited about the architectural possibilities. A city that can reshape itself based on need. Buildings that can move up and down through the cloud layers. This isn't just engineering, it's art. Amanda could see the mood in the room changing. I'm not saying this will be easy. The challenges are enormous. But so were the challenges of reaching space, landing on the moon, and colonizing Mars. Humans have always found ways to live in impossible places. The chairman of the council, Director Robert Hayes, had been listening quietly. Finally, he spoke. Dr. Price, what do you need to make this happen? Amanda took a deep breath. 3 years of development. A construction budget of 200 billion credits. And permission to recruit the best engineers, scientists, and workers in the solar system. The room erupted in discussion. Some council members were excited, others worried about the cost and risk. But everyone understood they were witnessing a historic moment. Commander Morrison stood up again. Dr. Price, if this works, you'll have changed human civilization forever. If it fails, you'll have killed thousands of people. Amanda looked at him steadily. Commander, every great achievement in human history has required someone to take that risk. Our ancestors left Africa not knowing what they would find. They crossed oceans without knowing what was on the other side. This is just the next step. The vote was close, but the project was approved. Humanity was going to build a floating city in the clouds of Venus. The dream was about to become reality. Captain Ben Martinez gripped the controls of the orbital construction platform Endeavour as they approached Venus. The planet looked deceptively peaceful from space, its thick clouds swirling in beautiful patterns. But Ben knew what lay beneath those clouds. He had read the reports from the failed missions, seen the videos of equipment dissolving in the acid atmosphere. Atmospheric entry in 10 minutes, called out his navigator, Lisa Chun. All systems green. Dr. Amanda Price stood behind Ben, watching the planet grow larger on the screen. 3 years had passed since the council approved her project. 3 years of designing, testing, and building the most ambitious construction project in human history. Now came the real test. "Remember," Amanda said to the crew, "we're not landing on Venus. We're landing in Venus. The atmosphere is our friend, not our enemy." The Endeavour shuddered as they hit the outer atmosphere. Unlike the violent entry into Mars or the Moon, this felt almost gentle. The thick atmosphere slowed them gradually, the specialized heat shields designed by Dr. Helen Brooks protecting them from the worst of the heat. 50 kilometers altitude, Lisa reported. Temperature 22 degrees. Pressure 1.0 atmospheres. "We're in the zone," Ben felt the ship stabilize. Outside, the yellow clouds stretched endlessly in all directions. They were floating in an ocean of air, suspended between the deadly surface below and the vacuum of space above. "Deploy the construction platform," Ben ordered. The Endeavour's cargo bay opened, and massive mechanical arms extended the first floating assembly platform. It was the size of a football field, covered in sensors and robotic construction equipment. Most importantly, it carried the first atmospheric processor. Ryan Foster, Amanda's deputy engineer, monitored the deployment from his station. "Platform stable, atmospheric processor online. We're generating lift and breathable air." Amanda felt a surge of excitement. The first human structure was now floating independently in Venus' atmosphere. "Begin Phase 1 construction," she ordered. The work was unlike anything attempted before. Traditional space construction happened in the vacuum between worlds. Here, they were working in dense atmosphere with its own weather patterns. The construction crews wore specialized suits designed to handle the unique challenges of Venus air. Tony Garcia, a veteran space construction worker, suited up for his first shift outside. His suit was bulky but flexible, with multiple layers of protection against the acid particles in the atmosphere. "This is weird," he said over the radio. "I can feel the air pushing against me." His partner, Beth Coleman, was checking her equipment. "At least we don't have to worry about things floating away. The air will slow everything down." They moved carefully along the construction platform, assembling the first structural elements of New Olympus. The work was slow and methodical. Every piece had to be perfectly positioned, every connection tested multiple times. "The atmosphere is actually helping us," Tony observed. "In space, you push against something and it keeps moving forever. Here, everything naturally comes to rest." Dr. Amanda Price monitored the work from the control room. The construction was proceeding faster than expected. The thick atmosphere that made Venus so dangerous was actually making construction easier in some ways. Engineer Sam Patterson was working on the power systems. His atmospheric thermal converters were exceeding all projections. "We're getting more energy than we calculated," he reported. "The temperature difference between the cloud layers is even greater than we expected. Can we use the extra power?" Amanda asked. Sam grinned. "I'm already designing expanded atmospheric processors. We can create a much larger bubble of breathable air." In the agricultural section, Maria Santos was setting up the first hydroponics modules. Growing food in Venus' atmosphere was a completely new challenge. The controlled environment of the floating city actually gave her advantages over Earth-based. "Farming, the atmospheric pressure is perfect for plant growth," she explained to her assistant, Dave Miller. "And we can control every aspect of the environment. Temperature, humidity, air composition. Plants are going to love it here." Dave was installing the first growing tanks. "It's strange to think we're farming in the clouds. My grandfather grew corn in Iowa. Now I'm growing food 50 kilometers above the surface of Venus." The construction continued around the clock. Teams worked in shifts, each group adding new sections to the growing city. The modular design allowed different teams to work on separate sections simultaneously. Captain Ben Martinez coordinated the complex logistics from the Endeavour. "Construction Team Alpha, you're cleared for Section 7. Construction Team Beta, hold position while we move the next module into place." The most challenging part was maintaining stability. Unlike a space station that could be anchored to a specific orbit, the floating city had to adapt constantly to changing atmospheric conditions. Wind shear increasing in Sector 3, reported meteorologist Dr. Alan Cooper. Recommend adjusting atmospheric processors to compensate. Ryan Foster made the adjustments from his engineering station. Processors online. City holding steady. The work was dangerous. The atmosphere of Venus was filled with electrical storms, turbulence, and corrosive particles. But the construction crews adapted quickly to their new environment. It's like working underwater, explained Beth Coleman during a break. You have to think in 3 dimensions, but you also have to account for air currents and pressure changes. Tony Garcia nodded. The suits are getting better too. The engineers keep improving the acid resistance. I feel safer in Venus' atmosphere than I did working on the asteroid miners. After 6 weeks of construction, the first major section of New Olympus was complete. The central hub contained life support systems, command centers, and housing for 200 people. The atmospheric processors were working perfectly, creating a bubble of breathable air around the entire structure. We're ready for the first test, Amanda announced to the construction crew. We're going to power down the Endeavor's life support and rely entirely on the city systems. It was a moment of truth. If the city systems failed, everyone would have to evacuate immediately. But Amanda was confident in her design. City life support online, Ryan reported. All systems green, Captain Ben Martinez made the announcement. Endeavor life support standing down. We are now breathing Venus air processed by New Olympus. The air tasted exactly like Earth air, sweet, clean, and breathable. The atmospheric processors were working perfectly, converting the carbon dioxide of Venus into oxygen and filtering out all the dangerous chemicals. Ladies and gentlemen, Amanda said over the intercom, welcome to humanity's first atmospheric city. The celebration was brief. There was still months of work ahead. The city needed to be much larger before it could support a permanent population. More modules, more atmospheric processors, more of everything, but the hardest part was over. They had proven that humans could build in Venus' atmosphere. The floating city was no longer just a dream. Phase 2 begins tomorrow, Amanda announced. We're going to double the size of the city. The construction crews went back to work with renewed energy. They were no longer just building a research station. They were building a new world for humanity. As the weeks passed, New Olympus grew. Larger and more complex. The modular design allowed for rapid expansion. New sections were added every few days, each one bringing the city closer to full operation. Sam Patterson's power systems were working better than anyone had hoped. We're generating enough energy to power a city of 10,000 people, he reported. And we're just getting started. Maria Santos had successfully grown the first crops in Venus' atmosphere. The plants are thriving, she told Amanda. The controlled environment is actually better than most Earth greenhouses. The moment of greatest danger came during the 7th week of construction. A massive storm system approached the city, with winds exceeding 200 kilometers per hour. All personnel to emergency stations, Ben Martinez announced. Storm impact in 30 minutes. The city's systems were designed to handle severe weather, but this was the first real test. The atmospheric processors adjusted automatically, changing the city's buoyancy to maintain stability. Riding the storm like a ship on the ocean, Ryan Foster observed as the city swayed but remained stable. The storm passed without major damage. New Olympus had weathered its first challenge. The floating city was becoming a reality. Kevin Johnson pressed his face against the viewing window of the transport ship and watched the yellow clouds of Venus swirl below. At 12 years old, he was about to become the first child to live permanently in the atmosphere of another planet. His parents, Dr. Nancy Johnson and engineer Peter Johnson, sat beside him, equally amazed by what they were seeing. "Look at that," Nancy whispered, pointing to a structure emerging from the clouds. "That's our new home." New Olympus stretched across the sky like a floating island. 6 months after construction began, the city had grown to house 300 people. The central hub rose majestically from the cloud layer, surrounded by residential modules, laboratories, and the massive atmospheric processors that kept everything aloft. "It's beautiful," Kevin said, It looks like it's flying. Peter smiled at his son. In a way, it is flying. We're all going to be living in the sky. The transport ship docked with New Olympus with a soft thud. Captain Ben Martinez, now serving as the city's transportation coordinator, welcomed the new arrivals personally. "Welcome to New Olympus," he said. "Population 300 and growing." The first thing Kevin noticed was how normal everything felt. The air was clean and breathable, the gravity felt just like Earth, and the corridors looked like any space station. Only the constant gentle swaying reminded him that they were floating 50 kilometers above the surface of Venus. Governor Claire Mitchell met the new families in the main reception area. She had been appointed as the city's first administrator, responsible for establishing the basic systems of government and law. "Welcome to your new home," she said warmly. "I know this is a big change, but I think you'll find that life here is quite comfortable." Kevin's eyes were wide as he looked around. "Do we really live in the clouds?" Claire knelt down to his level. "We do, and you know what? You're going to be the first generation of humans to grow up in the sky. That makes you pretty special." Frank Williams, the deputy administrator, handled the logistics of getting new residents settled. "Housing assignments are on your tablets," he told the families. "Your belongings from Earth should arrive on the next supply run. Until then, everything you need is provided." The Johnson family was assigned to a residential module in Sector 7. Their apartment was small but comfortable, with a large window that looked out into the endless clouds. Kevin immediately ran to the window and stared in wonder. "I can see all the way to the horizon," he said. "And it's all clouds." Nancy unpacked their few belongings while Peter reported to the engineering section. The city needed every skilled worker to maintain the complex systems that kept them alive. "The atmospheric processors are working perfectly," explained Chief Engineer Ryan Foster during Peter's briefing. "But we need constant monitoring. One failure and we could lose an entire section of the city," Peter nodded. "What's the biggest challenge?" "Weather," Ryan replied. "Venus storms are unlike anything on Earth. We're learning to predict them, but every storm teaches us something new." Meanwhile, Kevin was exploring his new home with the other children. Emma Watson, the daughter of communications officer Steve Watson and biologist Dr. Lavra Watson, had been living in New Olympus for 2 months. She was eager to show Kevin around. "The best part is the observation deck," Emma said, leading Kevin through the corridors. "You can see storms coming from really far away." The observation deck was a transparent dome that offered a 360-degree view of the surrounding clouds. Kevin gasped as he saw the vast expanse of Venus atmosphere stretching in all directions. "It's like being inside a cloud," he said. "We are inside a cloud," Emma laughed. "The whole city is surrounded by clouds. Sometimes we go up above them, sometimes we sink down into them." Dr. Lavra Watson was in the biology lab, studying how the unique environment affected plant and animal life. "The atmospheric pressure is perfect for most Earth organisms," she explained to her research assistant, Jim Parker. "But we need to be careful about contamination. One wrong microbe could destroy the entire ecosystem." The city's first major crisis came during Kevin's second week. A section of the atmospheric processors failed, threatening to send part of the city plunging into the lower atmosphere. Emergency alarms rang throughout New Olympus. "All non-essential personnel to emergency stations," announced Governor Mitchell over the intercom. "This is not a drill." Chief Engineer Ryan Foster raced to the control room where the problem was displayed on the main screen. "Processor Array 7 is losing power. We're losing buoyancy in the residential sector." The engineering team worked frantically to repair the system. Peter Johnson found himself working alongside maintenance specialist Dale Murphy and atmospheric technician Rose Clark. They had to access the processor array through an external maintenance tunnel. "The corrosion is worse than we thought," Dale reported as they examined the damaged equipment. "The acid particles are eating through the protective coating." Rose was already preparing replacement parts. "We need to replace the entire intake system. But we have to do it while the processor is still running." Peter had worked on dangerous repairs before, but never while floating in Venus atmosphere. How long do we have? Maybe an hour before the sector starts to sink, Ryan replied over the radio. If we lose too much altitude, we won't be able to recover. The repair team worked with desperate efficiency. Every minute counted. In the residential sector, families were evacuated to the central hub as a precaution. Kevin watched from the observation deck as part of the city visibly sagged. Are we going to crash? He asked Emma. No, Emma said, trying to sound confident. The engineers always fix everything. Nancy Johnson held her son close. The people here are very smart, she told him. They'll figure it out. Down in the maintenance tunnel, Peter and his team were racing against time. The replacement parts had to be installed perfectly, with no room for error. Connection secure, Dale reported. Power coupling online. Rose activated the new system. Atmospheric processor responding. We're generating lift again. The city slowly returned to its proper altitude. The crisis was over, but everyone had learned an important lesson. Life in Venus' atmosphere required constant vigilance and perfect maintenance. We need better protective coatings, Ryan told Amanda during the post-crisis meeting. The atmosphere is more corrosive than we calculated. Amanda nodded. I'll contact Dr. Helen Brooks on Earth. We need improved materials for the next construction phase. Despite the dangers, life in New Olympus quickly developed its own rhythm. The children adapted remarkably well to their aerial home. Kevin and Emma became fast friends, exploring every corner of the city together. I want to be an atmospheric engineer when I grow up, Kevin announced one day. I want to build more cities in the clouds. Emma had different interests. I want to study the weather. Venus storms are amazing. The city school was unlike any on Earth. Teacher Grace Parker had to develop entirely new curricula for children living in Venus' atmosphere. We're not just teaching them about their world, she explained to her husband, Dr. Paul Parker, who ran the medical center. We're teaching them about a completely new way of life. The children learned about atmospheric pressure, cloud formation, and the unique challenges of living in a floating city. They also learned practical skills like emergency procedures and basic maintenance. These kids are going to grow up understanding things that no human has ever understood before, Grace said. They're the first true citizens of Venus. The supply runs from Earth were major events. Every few months, a cargo ship would arrive with new equipment, supplies, and sometimes new residents. The children would gather at the docking bay to watch the ships arrive. My grandmother sent me a letter, Kevin said, showing Emma a paper envelope. She says she's proud of me for living in space. We don't live in space, Emma corrected. We live in the sky. The distinction mattered to the children. They didn't see themselves as space colonists, but as aerial humans. They were developing their own culture, their own way of understanding the world around them. Frank Williams managed the complex logistics of keeping the city supplied. Every gram has to be calculated, he explained to the new residents. Until we're completely self-sufficient, we depend on those supply runs. But self-sufficiency was becoming a reality. Maria Santos had successfully established food production that could feed the entire population. The atmospheric processors provided unlimited power. The city was becoming less dependent on Earth with each passing month. We're not just surviving, Governor Mitchell announced during a city meeting. We're thriving. New Olympus is becoming a real community. The children were proof of that. They played games in the corridors, attended school in the morning, and spent their afternoons exploring their floating home. To them, living in Venus' atmosphere was normal. I can't imagine living anywhere else, Kevin said one evening as he watched the sunset paint the clouds in brilliant colors. This is home. Dr. Amanda Price stared at the weather readings on her screen and felt her stomach drop. The atmospheric monitoring station had detected something that had never been seen before in Venus' upper atmosphere. A storm system so massive that it stretched across an entire hemisphere of the planet. Are you sure about these readings? She asked meteorologist Dr. Alan Cooper, who had been tracking the storm for 3 days. Alan nodded grimly. Wind speeds over 400 kilometers per hour. The storm is generating its own weather systems inside itself. I've never seen anything like it, Amanda walked to the main observation window of New Olympus. The city had grown to house 1,500 people over the past year. Children played in the corridors, families lived normal lives, and everyone had begun to think of Venus' atmosphere as home. Now all of that was threatened. How long until it reaches us? She asked. 18 hours, Alan replied. Maybe less if it continues to accelerate. Governor Claire Mitchell called an emergency meeting in the main conference room. The city's leadership gathered around the table, their faces serious. Outside, the yellow clouds of Venus swirled peacefully, giving no hint of the monster storm. Approaching, we have 3 options, Claire announced. We can evacuate the city, we can try to move it out of the storm's path, or we can stay and ride it out. Captain Ben Martinez, now serving as the city's transportation chief, spoke first. Evacuation is impossible. We don't have enough ships to move 1,500 people in 18 hours. Even if we did, where would we take them? Chief Engineer Ryan Foster was studying the storm data on his tablet. Moving the city is also impossible. We can adjust altitude, but we can't outrun a storm this size. It's moving too fast and covering too much area. That leaves option 3, Claire said quietly. We stay and fight. The room fell silent. Everyone understood what that meant. New Olympus had weathered smaller storms before, but nothing like this. A storm with 400-kilometer-per-hour winds could tear the city apart. What are our chances? Asked Dr. Paul Parker, the city's chief medical officer. Amanda looked at the storm projections again. The city was designed to handle severe weather. The atmospheric processors can adjust to maintain stability. The modular design means we can reconfigure sections as needed. But, Claire prompted. But this storm is beyond anything we planned. FOR, Amanda admitted. We're going into unknown territory. Frank Williams, the deputy administrator, was already working on emergency preparations. We need to secure all loose objects, move people to the most stable sections, and prepare for extended emergency operations. The next 18 hours were the longest in New Olympus history. Every resident was briefed on emergency procedures. Children were moved to the central hub, the most secure part of the city. Essential personnel remained at their posts while everyone else prepared for the worst. Kevin Johnson, now 13 years old and a veteran of Venus life, helped his parents prepare their apartment. Will the city really survive this? He asked. His father, Peter tried to sound confident. The engineers built this place to last. We've survived every storm so far. But privately, Peter was worried. He had seen the storm projections and they were terrifying. Emma Watson, Kevin's best friend, was helping her parents in the biology lab. Her mother, Dr. Lavra Watson, was securing critical research samples. Mom, what happens if the storm damages the atmospheric processors? Emma asked. Lavra paused in her work. Then we'll fix them. That's what we do here. We fix things and keep going. Chief of Security Dan Foster was coordinating emergency response teams throughout the city. All emergency stations are staffed, he reported to Governor Mitchell. We're as ready as we can be. In the agricultural district, Maria Santos was working frantically to protect the food production systems. The hydroponic gardens were essential for the city's survival, but they were also vulnerable to the violent motion that the storm would bring. If we lose the food production, we're in serious trouble, she told her assistant Dave Miller. The next supply run isn't for 2 months. Dave was securing the growing tanks with additional restraints. These plants have survived everything Venus has thrown at them so far. They're tougher than they look. The storm hit New Olympus like a sledgehammer. The first winds struck at dawn, Venus time. The city began to sway more violently than it ever had before. In the control room, Ryan Foster watched the stress indicators climb toward dangerous levels. Atmospheric processors responding to wind shear, he reported. We're maintaining altitude, but the lateral movement is extreme. The storm's true fury revealed itself gradually. What had started as strong winds became a howling monster that seemed determined to tear the city apart. The atmospheric processors worked overtime, constantly adjusting to maintain stability. Wind speed 420 kilometers per hour, Alan Cooper reported, and still climbing. Governor Mitchell activated the emergency communication system. All residents remain in your assigned emergency areas. The storm is at full strength. Emergency teams are responding to all incidents. In the residential sector, families huddled together as the city pitched and rolled like a ship in a hurricane. The children, who had grown up with the gentle swaying of normal Venus weather, were frightened by the violent motion. It's like the whole city is trying to shake itself apart, Kevin said. Holding tight to his parents, Nancy Johnson tried to stay calm for her son's sake. The city is designed for this. It's flexible, not rigid. It bends but doesn't break. But throughout New Olympus, things were breaking. In Sector 5, a connection between two modules failed, causing a section of the city to twist dangerously. Emergency alarms rang as the engineering teams rushed to make repairs. We're losing structural integrity in Sector 5, reported Maintenance Chief Tony Garcia. The connection is failing. Ryan Foster coordinated the repair effort from the control room. Seal off Sector 5. Emergency teams to Stations 7 and 8. The repair crews worked in conditions that would have been impossible on Earth. The storm winds made it dangerous to work outside, but the city's internal atmosphere remained stable. Tony Garcia and his team crawled through maintenance tunnels to reach the damaged connection. The storm is putting stress on joints we never expected, Tony reported. We need to reinforce the connections throughout the city. Meanwhile, in the power generation section, Sam Patterson was fighting to keep the atmospheric processors online. The storm was interfering with their operation, causing dangerous fluctuations in the city's power supply. We're getting feedback from the atmosphere, he told his team. The storm is so intense it's affecting the thermal differential. His assistant, Mike Turner, was monitoring the backup power systems. If we lose main power, we have maybe 6 hours on backup before the city starts to sink. The storm raged for 3 days. By the second day, everyone in New Olympus was exhausted. The constant motion made it difficult to sleep, eat, or work. But the city's residents showed the same determination that had brought them to Venus in the first place. Teacher Grace Parker kept the children calm in the emergency shelters. This is just weather, she told them. Bad weather, but still just weather, and weather always passes. Her husband, Dr. Paul Parker, was treating injuries in the medical center. Mostly minor cuts and bruises from people being thrown around by the storm's violence. But everyone was holding up remarkably well. These people are tougher than I thought, he told his nurse, Janet Mills. They've adapted to living in one of the most hostile environments in the solar system. The worst moment came on the third day when a massive wind gust hit the city's agricultural section. The protective barriers that Maria Santos had worked so hard to install held, but barely. We almost lost the entire food production system, she reported to the emergency command center. Another gust like that and we'll be in real trouble. But the gust didn't come. Instead, something miraculous happened. The winds began to decrease. Storm intensity dropping, Alan Cooper reported, hardly believing his own instruments. Wind speeds down to 300 kilometers per hour. The improvement continued throughout the day. By evening, the storm had weakened to levels that New Olympus could handle easily. The city had survived its greatest test. Ladies and gentlemen, Governor Mitchell announced over the intercom, the storm is passing, we made it through. The cheers that erupted throughout the city could be heard even above the diminishing wind. New Olympus had faced the worst that Venus could throw at it and had emerged victorious. We're still here, Kevin said to Emma as they looked out at the clearing clouds. We're still flying. The storm had tested every system, every person, and every idea behind the floating city. But New Olympus had proven that humans could build something strong enough to survive even in the most hostile environment in the solar system. The city was stronger now, not just because of improved engineering, but because its people had faced their greatest fear and won. 2 years after the Great Storm, Kevin Johnson stood on the observation deck of New Olympus and watched a second floating city rise from the clouds in the distance. At 15 years old, he had spent more of his life in Venus' atmosphere than on any solid ground. The swirling yellow and orange clouds below felt more like home than the pictures of Earth his grandmother sent in her letters. "Cloudhaven looks bigger than I expected," said Emma Watson, joining him at the viewing window. She was now 14 and had decided to study atmospheric engineering like her hero, Dr. Amanda Price. Kevin nodded. "My dad says it will house 5,000 people when it's finished. Twice as big as New Olympus." The construction of Cloudhaven was proof that humanity had truly mastered life in Venus' atmosphere. Admiral Ben Martinez, promoted after successfully managing the expansion project, coordinated the building from his command ship Voyager. The techniques developed during New Olympus construction had been improved and refined. "The second city is going up faster than the first," Ben reported to Dr. Amanda Price during their weekly planning meeting. "We know what works now. No more guessing," Amanda smiled as she reviewed the construction reports. "And the atmospheric processors are more efficient. Dr. Eric Turner's improvements have increased power output by 30%. Dr. Turner had joined the Venus project 6 months earlier, bringing new ideas about atmospheric chemistry. His work suggested that humans could eventually transform Venus' entire atmosphere, turning the planet into a world suitable for surface habitation. "It will take centuries," Eric explained to the research team, "but we could gradually convert the carbon dioxide atmosphere into something breathable. The floating cities would be the first step." The idea excited everyone, but Amanda remained focused on immediate challenges. "First, we need to prove we can build a sustainable civilization in the clouds. Then we can think about bigger projects." New Olympus had grown to 1,500 permanent residents, making it the largest human settlement beyond Earth and Mars. The city had expanded to include new residential districts, advanced research facilities, and even recreational areas where children could play safely. Kevin and Emma spent their afternoons in the youth center, learning skills that no human children had ever needed before. They studied atmospheric navigation, cloud formation, and the unique engineering requirements of floating cities. "I want to be the first person to design a city that can move," Kevin announced during one of their study sessions. "Imagine a floating city that could travel around Venus, exploring different atmospheric regions." Emma was more interested in the scientific possibilities. "I want to understand how Venus weather really works. We survived the Great Storm, but we still don't know why it formed." Their teacher, Grace Parker, encouraged both dreams. "You're the first generation of true Venus natives," she told her students. "You'll probably accomplish things we can't even imagine yet." The children of New Olympus were indeed developing capabilities that amazed their parents. They moved through the three-dimensional environment of the floating city with natural ease, instinctively understanding how to navigate in an environment where up and down were relative concepts. "Watch this," Kevin said to his father, Peter, during a family dinner. He pushed off from the floor and used the gentle air currents in the room to glide to the opposite wall. "Emma and I have been practicing atmospheric surfing." Peter shook his head in wonder. "When I was your age, the most adventurous thing I did was climb trees. You're surfing through the atmosphere of Venus." The success of New Olympus had attracted attention throughout the solar system. Scientists from Mars, researchers from the asteroid belt, and even government officials from Earth came to study the floating city technology. "We're receiving requests to build atmospheric cities around Jupiter and Saturn," Governor Claire Mitchell reported during a city council meeting. "The gas giant moons want to establish floating research stations in their host planets' atmospheres." Frank Williams, still managing logistics, was amazed by the city's success. "When we started, I thought we were just building an interesting research station. I never imagined we were creating a new branch of human civilization." The agricultural systems had exceeded all expectations. Maria Santos had developed growing techniques that were actually more efficient than Earth-based farming. The controlled environment of the floating city allowed for year-round production with no weather-related crop failures. "We're producing enough food to supply both cities," she reported proudly. "And the plants are adapting to the Venus environment. Some varieties are actually growing better here than they did on Earth." The medical data was equally encouraging. Dr. Paul Parker had been studying the health effects of long-term residence in Venus' atmosphere. "The atmospheric pressure is perfect for human health," he announced. "Better than Mars, better than the asteroid colonies. People living here are actually healthier than most Earth populations. The children born in New Olympus were developing differently than Earth children. Not in harmful ways, but in fascinating ones. They had better balance, stronger spatial awareness, and an intuitive understanding of three-dimensional movement. Kevin can navigate the city better than some adults who have lived here for years," Nancy Johnson told her husband. "These kids are evolving into something new." The success had not come without challenges. The Great Storm had taught valuable lessons about building in Venus' atmosphere. Every new construction project incorporated storm-resistant design features developed after that terrifying experience. "We learned that flexibility is more important than strength," explained Chief Engineer Ryan Foster to a group of visiting engineers from Mars. "Earth buildings are designed to be rigid. Venus buildings need to bend and adapt." The economic implications were staggering. The atmospheric processors generated enormous amounts of energy, far more than the cities could use. Plans were being developed to beam excess power to other colonies throughout the solar system. Venus could become the energy capital of human civilization, predicted economist Dr. Rachel Kim during a conference broadcast to Earth. "The atmospheric energy potential is virtually unlimited. But for the residents of New Olympus, the most important achievement was simpler. They had created a home in the sky, a place where families could live and children could grow up safely." "I received a letter from my sister on Earth," Nancy Johnson told Amanda during a casual conversation. "She asked when we're coming home for a visit. I realized that I don't think of Earth as home anymore. This is home." Amanda understood the feeling completely. She had spent 5 years of her life creating New Olympus, and now she couldn't imagine living anywhere else. "We've done something unprecedented," she said. "We've created a new way of being human." The success of the Venus cities had broader implications for human expansion into space. If humans could thrive in Venus' atmosphere, they could probably adapt to any environment in the solar system. "The techniques we've developed here could be used on Titan, Europa, even in the outer system," Admiral Martinez explained to a gathering of space exploration officials. "Venus has taught us how to live in hostile environments." As evening approached on New Olympus, families gathered for dinner in the community areas. Children played games in the corridors while their parents discussed the day's work. It looked like any human community, except for the spectacular views of swirling clouds outside every window. Kevin and Emma sat together in their favorite spot on the observation deck, watching the sunset paint the clouds in brilliant shades of gold and orange. In the distance, Cloudhaven continued its construction, growing larger each day. "Do you think we'll ever live on the surface of Venus?" Emma asked. Kevin considered the question seriously. "Maybe our grandchildren will, but I like it up here. I like being able to see forever in every direction." "I wonder what Earth kids think when they look up at the sky," Emma mused. "They probably never imagined that people could live up there." "Maybe that's what makes us different," Kevin replied. "We know that anywhere humans can dream of going, we can actually go." Dr. Amanda Price stood in her office, looking out at the city she had helped create. The gentle swaying that had once seemed dangerous now felt comforting, like the breathing of a living thing. New Olympus was alive with human activity, human dreams, and human determination. Governor Mitchell joined her at the window. "Any regrets about leaving Earth?" she asked. Amanda smiled. "None at all. We've proven that humans can build a civilization anywhere. Venus was just the beginning. Who knows where we'll go next?" The floating cities of Venus had become more than just human settlements. They were proof that humanity's greatest strength was not their technology or their intelligence, but their ability to adapt, survive, and thrive in any environment they encountered. The clouds of Venus, once seen as a barrier to human exploration, had become humanity's newest home.